what makes Star Wars fun be sci-fantasy schlock is that it loves being that, and it loves being inventive doing that.
Press A to play.
Right.
That's the big issue with midichlorians, not that they exist. Midichlorians could totally have a place in Star Wars. There's nothing wrong with the concept of midichlorians. What's wrong with midichlorians, though, is that they're a sci-fi explanation for a thing that was a fantasy trope for 3 movies long in a franchise that basically invented the modern sort of genre blockbuster. So it's just it goes against everything the original movies did, and that's the issue there.
It's not even a good explanation.
God, no.
There are so many better ways you could have explained it if you wanted to explain it, but you could have also just not explained it.
Yeah.
Or partially explained it. We know it has something to do with this. I mean, I don't know if midichlorians is the ideal example of this, you know?
They
But
actually,
a lot of the times in science, like, you have a partial explanation, you know?
No.
We know that this kind of goes with that. We don't know how or why, but, like, you know?
But I mean, I think the training in the Force is the only explanation you really need, right? Why is Yoda stronger than Luke? Because Yoda's been training longer.
actually,
Right.
the more I think about it, the more Star Wars actually just completely went in a Dragon Ball Z direction. Like, think about it.
Over
Like,
9,000.
no, but like you have the Z warriors and everything, and they have like, sort of intrinsically actually like a sort of more, like they have this more intrinsic sort of feel for these almost supernatural feats that allow them to tap into the energy that exists everywhere. Like, that's the whole spirit bomb thing. Like, that's just Goku tapping into energy all over the universe, but Goku can do that because of certain genetic traits, basically.
Yeah,
like
okay.
a generic human being in the Dragon Ball Z universe can do stuff like that, but Goku and some of the other characters can, like some humans as well, but they sort of most of the time do have to be born with that, kind of. And it is kind of like a sci-fi explanation where, yeah, it is actual energy from all over the universe that he's using to do this. And you can also just get better at it by just really, you know, hunkering down and just training all day long. Like,
But that's the thing, right? I would argue that that isn't, in a way, an example of consistency over explanation, because the energy is implied to be the same kind of energy they're using to, like, throw balls of energy at each other, you know? Like, the same kind of energy they're Hadoukening with.
yeah.
So, like,
Hadoukening.
it kind of makes sense that, like,
It's a verb.
it's been it's been made canon in that world that this energy exists. The idea that the main character can draw just a little bit from a lot of
Yeah.
things and end up with a really large amount, that just kind of makes sense on
Yeah,
the face
exactly.
of it.
No, yeah.
It doesn't need a bigger explanation than that.
No,
so
but
in,
that's what,
in
like,
Star
yeah.
Wars, like, you know, if you're talking about like midichlorians or I guess an explanation for the Force, I don't think you really needed one beyond Yoda's initial assertion that all things are part of the
Yeah.
Force and the Force is part of all things.
No, but I mean, that's exactly the thing. Like, I'm agreeing with that. Like, the whole thing is that they could have gone for a Star Wars for a Dragon Ball Z route if they started out with that, but they didn't, and then they kind of went the Dragon Ball Z route. Like, in the 4th movie they produced, that's kind of the weird thing.
Yeah.
Like, I completely agree. Within Star Wars, the explanation they gave for the Force in the first movies worked. They didn't have to change that. They didn't have to, and yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like midichlorians aren't
Yeah.
a way of getting deeper into it.
You got hitbox screwed.
They're
I saw
just a,
that.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. They're just not. They're not actually getting more into the Force. They're just actually totally a completely different explanation of it, which is just
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, right?
And again, in the 4th movie, you know?
yeah.
Yeah, and this is like, you know, again, it's kind of inconsistent too.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, it just wasn't the explanation. But yeah, it's kind of like how now they added that lightsabers are sentient, right? Since when?
Lightsabers are sentient.
Or at least carry memories and feelings and shit.
Yeah.
It's weird. Yeah.
No, the Kyber crystals are sentient now, apparently.
When did this happen?
When they decided it was plot convenient.
Okay.
Well, I mean, okay, I say plot convenient. I think in reality somebody was just trying to redesign Star Wars and this is something they came up with. But yeah, like in the 9th movie, the lightsaber shows...
There's a 9th movie?
memories.
I wouldn't know about that. I don't think there's a 9th movie.
Yeah,
Is there?
then
I
came
don't-
the canon explanation for the Sith crystals, which is that they're made to bleed via the Force, and the crystal is in pain, which drove me up the wall.
Listen, as
'cause
far as I'm concerned, there's only 3 movies.
The original explanation was so much better. It was like, you didn't need to go any further than that, man. They were synthetic. That's it. That's the only explanation you need. They couldn't get the real ones. They made them synthetic.
I'm actually okay
All red.
with 8
That's
of
it.
the mainline movies, as in they all have at least some redeeming qualities. There's just none whatsoever for the ninth.
I had such high hopes for the Knights of Ren. I wanted to see multiple Sith being badass at the same time on screen.
I didn't realize that was a thing till you explained it, and then I was like, OMG. Can you imagine the epicness of that battle scene?
Right, like it would have been so ludicrous.
Okay, except now.
But why do that if you can bring back Palpatine? Huh? So much cooler.
Right, like just think about like Rey and friends fighting Ren and friends
Oh.
in one big epic ridiculous showdown. You know, like would have been so much better.
I still can't wrap my head around how bad the Rise of Skywalker was. Like, it's seriously
also,
baffling.
They also leave so many storytelling opportunities on the table sometimes that it's just absolutely baffling. Like, why was Ren's crystal not Vader's? Like, his crystal was cracked, it needed vents, right? So, I mean, given how obsessed he is with Vader, does it not make sense, given that he recovered his helmet?
I can't even talk about the movie in that way, as in, that to me sounds like you're still trying to sort of...
I'm inserting narrative where there isn't.
Yeah, because, like, The Rise of Skywalker is just a clusterfuck of a movie. It's not... It's like I can understand, like, criticism with The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, where it's like, man, it's a shame they went for this or that, or they could have done it. But with The Rise of Skywalker, it's just nonsense. It's just 2.5 hours of crazy. I can't.
See, for me, I can't see a good storytelling opportunity left on the table and not be upset about it. And when I look at that movie, there was so much potential there, right? When you think about the fact that, okay, lightsabers are sentient now, weird, but what do we have then in terms of story components? We have the original Anakin Skywalker lightsaber in the story very prominently and in Rey's hands. And we have Ren, who is obsessed with Vader, who went and fished out his helmet and has a cracked red crystal that he made his lightsaber with, whose origin is unexplained. Now, does it not make sense?
So is the helmet.
Right. So
Vader was on a star.
Right.
Yeah.
So does it not make sense that that crystal should have really been Vader's, so that thematically, at the end, you have the two versions of Anakin's lightsaber fighting each other? Because one is the light side of the Force, one is the dark. You've got the lightsabers representing that thematically.
Okay.
But that's trying to make sense of nonsense, yeah.
Rey and Ren representing that thematically. And they're allies, right? For everyone that Rey has on her team, Ren has a counterpart for in his Knights of Ren, effectively.
But the thing is, like, when you go down that road, you're gonna have to... You shouldn't be able to stop talking for, like, several hours, because
I mean, yeah.
if you change that to make a better movie, you still have to change every other aspect of the movie to make it a good movie. Like,
of that particular movie, sure.
Yeah.
But this is the thing, right? Like
the second one too, though.
I could go ranting.
oh, I love Last Jedi. It shouldn't have... For me, it's just... The Force Awakens could have made for a good trilogy, and The Last Jedi could have made for a good trilogy, but they obviously aren't part of the same trilogy. And then for the third one, they were just like, fuck it, we don't even care anymore.
Maybe that's what's upsetting me too, right? Because I would agree with that assessment. I would say that I think thematically the 7th and the 8th could have made decent series, but they are very different, right?
The Force Awakens is comfort food, and that works.
Yeah.
Like, it's Star Wars as you know it, and it's trying to get that old Star Warsy feeling back. Perfect.
Right, like I personally would have liked to see that trilogy, because to me that's what Star Wars is. It's
Oh yeah, I'm a Last Jedi kind of a guy, yeah.
pop science fantasy. That's what Star Wars is.
But
That's
Star
all.
Killer Base just didn't do it for me. Like, all that stuff.
Yeah,
I just...
and then like, okay, so the next one, right, Ryan Johnson's one, was trying to be deep.
Yeah.
But there's something about Your Parents Were No One that doesn't mesh with Abrams' movie. But then, you know what's really disappointing is that the 9th one then, I expected to be a return to
I was
the
like,
story
oh,
that the 7th was telling.
I was like, it's such a shame that we have J.J. Abrams doing this and not like a fun or cool director with like a vision. But you know what? I can live with there being like a return to safe, good old-fashioned comfort food Star Wars. And then we got The Rise of Skywalker.
Right.
Oh, it's still so weird.
I don't know. I didn't love it. I didn't love it.
I like the comfort food analogy.
That's what, it's just like a soft reboot almost. It's like just a retread. It's just, hey, remember all those things that you liked about Star Wars Episode 4? That's this again.
But that's all Star Wars has to be, right? In my opinion,
But I don't entirely agree with that because Empire Strikes Back did stuff differently and was better for it. So in that sense, I don't believe that you have to have sort of the same like narrative structure and the same kind of tone to be good Star Wars.
And I don't mean the same narrative structure, but like okay, for me, Star Wars is basically the sci-fi equivalent of a B horror movie, right?
Well, it's fantasy though, like.
No, it is true. It is
yeah,
true. It is
yeah,
science fantasy,
yeah.
but like still, for me, it's the science fantasy equivalent of a big horror movie, right? And that's all it needs to be, in my opinion. If you're gonna go harder, if you're gonna make it more than that, then you really have to make it more than that. And the truth is, there isn't enough in the original Star Wars to do that way. At least in my opinion, like they just didn't go that route. They didn't explore that direction. They didn't do it in a way that would allow for that, in my opinion. So like for me, I think that it should just accept that it's basically a B movie with a high budget and just embrace that. Have fun with it. Go do something crazy with it. If you're gonna get serious and you're gonna go in a different direction,
I agree with that,
commit to that.
but then I'd say that The Force Awakens doesn't qualify because The Force Awakens isn't as fun and inventive as the original Star Wars. It's literally just such a huge retread where I'm like,
I mean, this is true, but I also feel that it was a necessary retread to prove that we can. I think Star Wars was just trying to prove that it was returning to form after the prequels.
but then they shouldn't have done that with a number 7 because the only thing it did, like, by going back to that same timeline and those same characters, all we got, like, it's a really depressing movie if you look at it.
This
like,
is a different conversation,
yeah.
to be honest. I also believe that we should have left these particular Star Wars characters behind ages ago.
No, but also, like, I mean, it's such a depressing thing for Han Solo to, after all of the character growth and all of the experiences, to just resort back to what he was at the beginning of the franchise. And for, like, sort of the main, like, antagonists of the new trilogy basically be a retread of the antagonists of the original trilogy. And for, like, nothing to have sort of mattered, but it's not even commenting on the fact that it didn't matter, because I could be okay with the new trilogy being like, yeah, even though we defeated the Emperor and we defeated whatever, you know, there's always going to be bad guys. I can live with that. That can work. But the movie didn't even comment on it. It was just like, oh no, here we go, First Order. That sucks.
It's just there for people to experience the original Star Wars again, yeah. And I mean, I think that's all it was trying to accomplish, right? And I think in that sense it succeeded. I do agree though that like if we're gonna have successful Star Wars in the future, we need to just let it die and let it go. Like it's time. Like Star Wars has or this particular plot line, this particular set of characters, nicely done. Did you get every single one?
No, for some reason when you hit it with the cape, if you don't walk in with a Yoshi, then you just get it.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, so like I think that the real problem is that if you're gonna get serious with any story, because I believe that it's possible to get schlocky or serious with literally any story. I think if you're gonna get serious though, you really need to commit to being serious, and that's just not something Star Wars ever did. They're halfway between trying to be a serious story and accepting that they're not.
Oh no, 100%. But that's not.
That they keep going back to the exact same storyline. Because they're afraid to like just do something different, but they need to if they're going to get serious, because we've seen too much of these characters already. Oh no,
but the thing is, I think we agree on that one. The thing is that I'm not even asking or wanting or demanding stories to be more dark or serious or deep or whatever. It's more like that. Yeah, I also love Star Wars as B sci fantasy schlock, but there's a good way and a bad way of doing that. I don't think The Force Awakens was all that great at doing that. Like, there's a lot of fun to be had with dumb, stupid action movies, but there's a difference between Die Hard and Transformers. And that's my thing with The Force Awakens. Like, it doesn't, to me, feel like a return to form for Star Wars all that well, because it's not, like, what makes Star Wars fun, be sci-fantasy schlock, is that it loves being that, and it loves being inventive doing that, and ambitious doing that. And The Force Awakens doesn't have that for me. It's just like, we're gonna do these things that people liked because we know they like it, and that's not the same feel and the same sort of like creativeness and the same sort of like eagerness to be something cool or interesting.
I understand what you mean. Yeah, I really do think that like it was just an attempt by them to try to recapture the sort of confidence from the public.
Oh yeah.
Playing it safe and everything after everybody.
And practical
hated it.
facts and
That's
getting back
exactly
to
what
what
it is,
makes
yeah.
Star Wars. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Kind of like how the first Spider-Man after Marvel got Spider-Man back
Oh, yeah.
wasn't like, you know, a particularly creative movie necessarily. It was just a way to prove
Yeah.
they were going to do Spider-Man.
Young Peter
correct.
Parker in high school, stuff like
Right,
that.
they were like, hey, listen, guys, it's not going to be like before, we swear.
Yeah, not a student anymore and all of that stuff, yeah.
Right, and so this is why I think that number 7 is what it is. But I mean, like, okay, yeah, now looking back at it from the future, yeah, of course. I mean, if we knew what Star Wars was going to end up being at the time that it came out, they could have done a million things differently. But yeah, I don't know. It annoys me that like in the same company that made Marvel as expansive as it is, just can't
Star Wars
seem to do
feels
the same with Star Wars.
Star Wars
Yeah.
feels so tiny.
Like Marvel jumped time periods, showed us characters from the past and the future.
Yeah.
Is in now different timeline territory where there is no like official canon really because anything could happen, and anyone can be any character, and like in the midst of all that we also have Star Wars where they're also like no, the same storyline, that one, this one 10-year time period.
Solo is
beat
such an
its
amazing
ass.
example as well of how they just aren't willing to take like any chances or be creative in any way whatsoever. Like with Solo, it's like we're just going to focus on a character we already know, and we're only going to explain things that you've already heard about or that you've already seen or that have already been hinted at, but like nothing new, nothing like creative. And that's what made Star Wars interesting. Not that it was just a fun romp in space. It was a creative fun romp in space. It was new and different, and it took chances, and that's what made it fun. And oh god, all the new things, it's just, and that's why I'm still so pissed about The Mandalorian. Like the Mandalorian season 1 was so much fun to me because it finally felt like, hey, this is, you know, just good old fashioned Star Wars space adventures. And then season 2 was all remember this character and that character, and we're gonna bring in all these Clone Wars things, and we're gonna bring in all these Rebels things, and we're gonna link to all the other movies, and and it felt tiny again, and it felt so just derivative and fan servicey, and it's just like I don't want to watch Star Wars for them to reference all these animated shows and other things. I like Star Wars just because it should be like a fun adventure and.
Yeah, that's fair. And you know, like, there's just so much story to tell in Star Wars as well. I mean, the Thrawn book series did so much to bring Star Wars back into the consciousness. Wouldn't it be great to make a series out of it, right? Wouldn't it be great to tell a story in Star Wars that wasn't about an effing Jedi?
Oh god, yeah.
But like, you know,
One of the things why I loved Rogue One so much.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so adding the complexity of there being people that can be force sensitive without being a Jedi.
Perfect, yeah.
Without it being sort of clear what training is necessary, like what are the requirements, etc., adds so much mystery and, again, like complexity, right? So somehow, some people can feel the force, maybe have different sorts of interactions with it without having the complete picture.
But yeah, that's exactly like.
I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
Certain cultures, races, and practices and religions in that universe are force sensitive in different ways, and there are even stories about dark side force users that aren't actually evil. There are stories about the founding of the Sith or the start of the current era of the Sith, and the same thing about the Jedi. There are stories about all the different cultures that are force sensitive. Like Darth Maul came from a force sensitive world. Like his entire people are force sensitive.
All those midichlorians. All of them.
That whole thing seems so broken though, because you have witches that, I don't know, like they seem to be able to just manipulate reality at will or something, and I kind of felt like, I mean, where do you go from there then? And then why are they somehow missing from like the Skywalker saga that you can't seem to stop talking about, kind of thing? I don't know. I felt like, yeah, it was just too much. They took it a step too far. Like, oh, something's broken, we can use the witch to fix it.
Fair enough.
Well, I don't have enough knowledge about narrative stuff, but I kind of felt like, man, but like, what do you?
No, I mean, you're not
There's no way to
wrong. Like,
escalate.
At that point, again, like if there's no consistency, it's green rocks, right? We made a mistake, which, but to be fair, I also didn't watch that series, so I can't comment on it fully.
I did, and I kind of liked it.
I mean, it
What
was
series is that one?
Clone Wars?
Clone
It's
Wars?
Clone
Oh, yeah.
Wars.
Yeah, it was a good series as a whole. But yeah, like, I mean, I have to admit, I didn't watch that series, so I'm not familiar firsthand with it. I do understand the frustration of, like, there being an ultimate solution to a problem that shouldn't have one, because then there's no stakes. But, like,
And that it was constant, because it really felt like, nope, we'll just conjure up another witch, it's fine. Oh, this thing is going on? No, hold on, we got a witch. There's a witch for that.
See, I keep remembering the Plagueis story, where
Oh, yeah.
all you were told is that they got this person from a culture that was entirely force sensitive just to train them as an assassin. And how good an assassin they would be despite not being a fully trained Sith, because they're already force sensitive. And stuff like that would be really genuinely interesting to think about, right? So they're already attuned as a people to the dark side of the Force, but that doesn't make them inherently evil, right? So how is it that they interact then with the dark side of the Force? Why is it the Jedi think it's inherently evil? What the hell's going on there? That would be interesting. A discussion of exactly what the Republic did that's just terrible would be interesting. I mean, someone once sat down and counted 6 war crimes on the part of the Republic within a 2-week period. Right, like that's something you could talk about and point out, right? The Sith weren't just Sith for no reason. There was a reason, and that reason originally was that there was a lot of problems that weren't addressed.
Well, I do think Disney likes the sort of black and white, good and bad thing.
They do, but they shouldn't.
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't make for as interesting storytelling from my naive perspective.
No, it 1000% doesn't make for storytelling as interesting, particularly because if you're gonna do that,
That sucks. Man.
This is part of like narrative and storytelling as a whole, right? This idea that in the modern day, the majority of stories are character-driven storytelling, right? The majority, to the point where in a lot of stories, the plot itself actually technically makes no sense if you think about it, but you don't notice and you don't care because the plot does lead you to the next part of that character's evolution or the next problem they would need to solve logically. So it does make a kind of emotional sense, and as a result, you don't really think about the fact that it doesn't make logical sense because it doesn't need to. Right, you know this is the next thing that had to happen in this story. The problem is that back in the day, before this became the storytelling norm, stories weren't necessarily told this way. There were a lot of stories that used more of a setting-based technique, wherein the characters themselves were kind of not really relevant. They were static and kind of cardboard cutouts, but that didn't matter because the interesting part of the story wasn't the characters, it was the setting. It was the questions the setting asked. It was the concept of the setting and the plot, right? And so the character became part of the background because they didn't need to be anything else. The setting and the plot was the interesting thing.